The FBC is a government agency that is given the task to locate, contain, research, and ultimately control paranatural phenomenon. Because of their nature, conventional understanding of physics and the nature of reality are no longer satisfactory.
It's always something we've never seen before, and studying them requires new instruments, methodologies, sometimes entirely new fields of science.
Whenever new information is received, the body of knowledge accepted by the Bureau must be allowed to recontextualize their beliefs. Despite this, dogmas can arise within the research and executive staff. Knowledge that is either a popular opinion or believed to be true is used as a foundation for future scientific inquiry. However, buildings raised on a shaky foundation will inevitably collapse. With the coming of the Hiss invasion, the vast majority of the scientists are either dead, or in Dr. Darling's case, no longer here. Because of this, a new mode of thought will have to be ushered in. Once the control point outside of Central Executive is cleansed, Jesse meets one of the remaining researchers, Emily Pope.
I'm Emily.
After only 5 years of working for the FBC, Emily managed to propel herself to being the assistant to the current missing head of research. According to an employee report commending her promotion, she is described as having a keen eye for detail and a quick grasp of paranatural concepts. She is professional and diligent, though some of her coworkers complain of social disinterest. It is no surprise that her intense interest in trying to figure things out makes her a bit asocial. Another characterization for her is the feeling of being kept separate from some research. This is partially due to Trench's insistence on controlling information flow and the fact that Dr. Darling specifically did not want her included in dimensional research. This is because he considered the slide projector to be too volatile, and as the most promising researcher he had, he wanted to keep her safe from the dangers. With both Trench and Darling gone, any roadblocks to information has been removed. Throughout the story of Control, Emily steps up and takes on the duties of the head of research. By the end of the game, she is officially promoted by Director Faden. All Bureau knowledge is now at her disposal. As mentioned above, Emily represents a new mode of thought for the research department. We have one example in the game of what dogmas may be impacted. Let's take a look. A difference in opinion can clearly be seen in a paper written by Emily entitled The Astral Plane Counter-Essay. This essay calls out a logical fallacy in Darling's rhetoric. Let's read it and then explore a template used in critical thinking to differentiate fact, opinion, and truth. Dr. Darling is insistent that certain objects of power share a direct connection to the board, an entity or group of entities that we have little information on, or little that I am allowed to access. In his written reports, he states that there is a clear link between these objects of power, the board, the astral plane, and the oldest house itself. His work supposes that these links are innate, a fact ingrained into the very nature of objects, such as the hotline or the service weapon. But what if these particular objects were never links to the board, but had that connection forced upon them? Isn't it strange that no other objects of power require such a direct contact with the board? Isn't it strange that using the service weapon or the hotline will result in grievous harm or even death if the user is not the director, or at least worthy of the role? Why do we assume that this involvement by the board is a natural fact and not something more redacted? Back in my college days, I took a critical thinking class. The activities involved taking a paragraph of information and breaking it down into different categories. Sometimes what a person says is fact. Sometimes it is an opinion. Sometimes it is an outright lie. After presenting my own modified version of this, we'll go back to Emily's counter-essay and draw comparisons to her reasoning on why Dr. Darling's base beliefs may be incorrect.
Archaeology is the search for fact, not truth.
This one line of dialogue is a simplified version of this video's thesis. Fact is a thing that can be objectively true and can be proven by science. Truth is something determined by reason and logic. Therefore, truth can be debated and is not objectively true or false. Personal truth is a thing one individual accepts as true, but another may have conflicting truth. Universal truth can be considered as a universal fact. Some can be proven, like 1 + 1 = 2. This is a universal fact. Some cannot be proven, like expressed in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Many millions of years ago, a race of hyper-intelligent, pan-dimensional beings got so fed up with the constant bickering about the meaning of life that they commissioned 2 of their brightest and best to design and build a stupendous supercomputer to calculate the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
These terms are not to be confused with the simple true and false distinction. True is objectively accurate, and false is objectively inaccurate. In the parable of the 3 blind men and the elephant, we see an example of this. All 3 had a tactile experience, which is considered fact. The broad side of an elephant is solid and unmoving like a wall. The leg is large in diameter like a tree, and the trunk can slither through the air like a snake. The characteristics of what they experienced are fact. They felt and directly experienced them. Their personal truth, however, was false. An elephant is not a snake, or a tree, or a wall. The universal truth is that it is in fact an elephant. This simple fallacy showcases how various people can look at the same evidence, like Dr. Darling and Emily Pope, and come to different conclusions. This next section is a philosophical equation on how to determine personal truth. It is modeled loosely upon the scientific method. Please be advised it is entirely based upon my own ideas. As such, it is my personal truth. That being said, I'm curious if anyone has any conflicting thoughts on the subject. Emily states at the start of her counter-essay that access to information on the board is limited to her. This translates to the first fallacy, the absence of fact. When having a conversation with a 5-year-old about how to calculate interest accrued for stock investments, the child has no clue what you're talking about. This child has not yet learned simple math, so how can he or she rationalize the equations of compound interest and calculus? Generally speaking, this child will tell you flat out that they do not understand. However, one unfortunate personality trait is that we as people do not like to admit we are ignorant on the matter. This ignorance leads to the development of a false personal truth. When out to lunch one day, my father and I were discussing this exact topic, and I decided to test it. When the waitress came and asked us how our day was going, we told her we had tickets to see a famous band that evening. The name of the band we gave her was fictitious, and we were not doing anything of the sort as this band did not exist. Rather than admitting she did not know this famous band, she became genuinely excited, claimed to be a fan, and stated her parents enjoyed them too. The waitress would rather accept a false premise than admit she did not know what we were talking about. Another word for personal truth is belief. These beliefs, as just demonstrated, can be formed around an absence of information. The child may admit they don't understand investment strategies, but not everyone is willing to admit to ignorance. The simple words, "I don't understand," is important here. Emily accepts that without all necessary information, it is impossible to make a solid hypothesis. This is where Pope's inner nature helps her as a scientist. She is curious about everything. The more you know, the better you can formulate a hypothesis. A greater knowledge base has a trajectory of creating a more accurate personal truth. The next step of this is judging whether or not the knowledge base is fact, opinion, or false. One way to describe this is hearsay. This is a broad legal term, but one version of it is secondhand information. First-hand information is when you are on a boat and witness a dolphin jump out of the ocean. Second-hand information is if your friend returned from the sea and told you they witnessed a dolphin jumping out of the ocean. While it may seem like there is no reason to distrust your friend, you cannot verify if this event truly happened, and it is therefore considered hearsay. This is because when testifying with secondhand information, the court cannot determine whether the information you provide is factual or false. In this situation, the two expressions "photos" or "it didn't happen" or "no body, no death" describes this perfectly. Emily Pope has read all available reports by Dr. Darling on the astral plane, objects of power, and the board. His papers should be considered hearsay. Instead of accepting it as fact, Emily finds some fallacies in his work. A few examples are the jukebox and the slide projector object of power. These do not require a board ritual to activate, so the premise that the board is linked to them is an opinion rooted on shifting sand. Because the service weapon is linked to the board now, does not mean it was linked 20,000 years ago. Bureau scientists did not exist at that time, so they would have no way to verify if this is true or not. In essence, this belief cannot be determined to be fact. Dr. Darling, however, accepted this premise as fact, creating an unstable foundation to build his theories upon. Emily recognizes two things with this. One, she would need more information to determine if this foundation is factual. And two, she accepts that she cannot determine it one way or another. As such, a universal truth on the matter cannot be attained. For a purely rational mind like Emily, she will first demand access to all available information, then confirm the validity of this information herself, rather than accept the beliefs of those who came before. Once this is accomplished, a personal truth is formulated. One word to describe this was injected into the public lexicon by the science fiction author Robert Heinlein in his novel, Stranger in a Strange Land. In the story, grok is a verb that translates as to drink. However, what it truly means is a profound, intuitive, and emotional understanding of a thing. One can look at a glass of water on the table, know it is there, its chemical composition, and what its purpose is, but until you are dying of thirst and physically drink it, you cannot fully grok the nature of water. Dr. Darling can tell his entire department what is going on with objects of power and the board, but until Emily experiences these things herself, she cannot truly grok these concepts. For her, the pursuit to grok the paranatural world means she will occasionally disagree with the dogma of the Bureau's old guard. This brings us to the final and most difficult fallacy experienced for those pursuing universal truth: a sense of grok that is false. Usually this is due to the two previously discussed problems, an absence of fact and the refusal to verify hearsay. Just because you have an emotional connection to this truth does not mean it's true. When a lightning bolt strikes during a storm, an individual has direct contact with this event. They hear the thunder, they feel the earth tremble. In ancient times, it was understood that Zeus would cast lightning down from the heavens. It could be argued that the people of that age could grok that belief. The trouble is that we have a bad habit of misinterpreting an opinion with grok. With the advent of science, we learn this model of lightning is in fact not true. New information that contradicts your belief should be first verified, experienced, and, if determined to be true, allowed to recontextualize your personal truth. One negative trait of people is it is hard to admit that they are wrong. Education means we have a large base of knowledge. It does not mean that we have verified the accuracy of this knowledge. String theory is one pursuit in physics that scientists have devoted their lives to study. What would happen if after 40 years of research you learned that the premise was false? Could you admit to yourself that you spent your entire life pursuing a goal that could not be achieved? Or would you suppress this thought, dig your feet in deeper, and begin rejecting factual information? It may be better for your emotional health to continue on a failed pursuit or believing a falsehood. Accepting you were wrong can be horrifying, especially when the truth may be you wasted your time, or in the case of this scientist, your life on something that was eventually meaningless. Dialogue seen in the game tells us that Emily is not one of those people. Jesse asks about her teleporting through control points. This is her response.
It's just, wow. This blows my control point theories right out of the water. I love it.
Our new head of research is able to accept when she is wrong. Not only that, but she is excited to learn when she is wrong. For a researcher like her, the pursuit of universal truth is far more important than her ego. With her new position, she has access to data that was previously denied her. I cannot wait to see what new insights she is able to uncover by the time Control 2 finally comes around. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please drop a like and subscribe to receive updates on future uploads. If you would like to help support the channel, a Patreon has been set up and the link is in the description below. Have a great day and peace be with you all.